Welcome to This Explainer. When we picture ancient Egypt, our minds almost automatically go to soaring pyramids, golden death masks, and pharaohs, right? But today, we're doing something a little different. We're going to travel roughly 3,500 years back in time, and we're going to reconstruct this incredible civilization from the ground up. We're looking at the lived experiences of ordinary people, and as we'll see, the sheer, sweaty, daily grind of producing just two things, bread and beer, literally built the Egyptian empire. You see this in the ancient texts all the time. They literally implore the living, do not thirst at the sight of beer. And their classic afterlife prayers beg for thousands of bread and beer. For an ordinary Egyptian living along the Nile, this wasn't just, some beautiful religious poetry. This was a reflection of a really harsh, dusty reality. The Nile Valley was brutally hot, and the physical labor was intense. Bread and beer were the absolute fundamental engines of survival. They provided the exact caloric and nutritional baseline a person needed just to keep going in the ancient world. To truly understand how this society functioned, we actually have to start right down in the dirt. The entire state relied on the Nile's annual flood, which dumped this thick, incredibly nutrient-rich black silt all over the agricultural basins. And from that dark earth sprang two absolutely foundational crops, barley and emmer wheat. Now, emmer is a hulled grain, and let me tell you, it is incredibly stubborn. Unlike the bread wheat we use today that threshes super easily, emmer kernels are locked tight inside these rigid, fibrous little packets called spikelets. Getting to the actual food inside, that was a monumental, backbreaking task. Transforming that harvest was, frankly, a grueling process, and it was almost entirely performed by women. Just imagine the sensory overload for a second. The stifling heat, the rhythmic, heavy thud of wooden pestles smashing into limestone mortars. They had to moisten the grain, pound it just right to break the chaff without crushing the kernel itself, lay it out to sun-dry, and then endlessly winnow and sieve it. And after all that, they'd spend hours kneeling on the ground grinding the tough emmer on a stone saddle corn. What they got was a coarse flour, and honestly, it was usually full of microscopic bits of chaff, ash from the baking fires, and wind-blown desert sand. That sand would actually slowly grind down their teeth over a lifetime. But think about it. How on earth do you feed tens of thousands of laborers hauling massive stone blocks for a pyramid using just household grindstones? Well, you scale up. The state essentially transformed household baking into these massive industrial-scale food complexes known as the Pershena, or the House of the Commissariat. Picture these cavernous, smoke-filled rooms where bakers are hauling around incredibly heavy bell-shaped ceramic molds called beja. They'd preheat these molds in blazing open hearths, pack them with dough, cover them, and bury them in searing hot ashes. It was a suffocatingly hot, intense environment. But this kind of pyrotechnic engineering was brilliant. It allowed the state to churn out the millions of calories needed to fuel their massive workforce. Now, let's talk about the beer. For a really long time, historians kind of just assumed that ancient Egyptian beer was basically crumbled, half-baked bread that they soaked in water and left to ferment. Kind of a primitive gruel, right? Well, modern archaeology has completely blown that theory out of the water. Thanks to the groundbreaking work of researchers like Dr. Delwyn Samuel, who actually used scanning electron microscopy on 3,500-year-old pottery residues, we know that old assumption is entirely wrong. The actual consensus? It was a highly sophisticated, multi-stage bioprocessing system. This wasn't just some accidental mush, it was a highly controlled science. The brewers would carefully sprout or malt the emmer and barley, which converts the starches into fermentable sugars. Then they'd coarsely grind that malt. Next, they'd take a totally separate batch of grain and cook it in water. By mixing that cooked cereal with the raw malt and sieving the whole thing into giant vats, they created the absolute perfect environment for wild, airborne yeasts to take hold. What they ended up with wasn't a clear, fizzy lager like we drink today. It was this thick, cloudy, porridge-like brew. It was essentially liquid bread. And here is where we hit a fascinating biological masterstroke. You see, emmer wheat and barley contain high concentrations of something called phytic acid. Phytic acid is what we call an anti-nutrient. If you eat raw or unleavened grain, that acid actually binds to vital minerals right inside your digestive tract, totally blocking your body from absorbing them. Literally, if the ancient Egyptians had just boiled and eaten their wheat every day, that entire labor force would have completely collapsed from severe bone diseases and profound iron deficiency anemia. So this is absolutely crucial. Through the exact science of fermentation, they were neutralizing that phytic acid. This complex brewing process broke down the anti-nutrients, completely unlocking all those essential minerals, like iron, calcium, and zinc, so the body could actually use them. Plus, the mild alcohol content, combined with the boiling process, provided a safe, pathogen-free alternative to drinking straight from the Nile, which was often contaminated. This daily brew wasn't just a refreshing drink after work. It was a miraculous medical and nutritional shield that literally saved the entire civilization from disease. And because it was such a biological necessity, this crossed directly over into economics. Bread and beer literally became the hard currency of the realm. If we look at the records from Deir el-Medina, that's the village of highly skilled workmen who built the royal tombs in the Valley of the Kings, we can literally see their paychecks. A standard worker earned roughly 300 liters of emmer wheat for bread and 112 liters of barley for beer every single month. Your entire social rank was dictated by the sheer volume of grain the state owed you. These meticulous wages are just a brilliant illustration of the staggering bureaucracy of the pharaohs. Literally everyone, from the lowest laborer to the highest priests and officials, received mathematically calculated daily rations. We often see bread and beer distributed in a very precise 2-to-1 ratio. It's like a giant puzzle. And this math ensured a perfectly measured, uninterrupted flow of calories from the state's granaries directly to its people. It stabilized the economy, and it guaranteed that the labor force could wake up and survive another day under that blazing sun. But as you might guess, not all beer was created equal. That standard daily ration for a laborer, it was served in a basic, standardized ceramic jar, and it was gritty, thick, and strictly functional. But contrast that with the luxurious, royal, ritual brews that the elite enjoyed, or the ones offered to the gods in the mortuary temples. These premium beers were carefully filtered, they were sweetened with dates and honey, and flavored with aromatic spices like coriander or even sycamore figs. It was really the ultimate intersection of ancient Egyptian chemistry and culinary art. These staples didn't just stay in the dirt of the fields or the accounting ledgers, though. They reached right into the realm of the cosmos. Bread and beer were profoundly sacred. Take the goddess Hathor, for example. Her temple was actually revered as the home of intoxication and a place of enjoyment. Hathor was the deity of joy, music, love, and yes, drunkenness. Because to the ancient Egyptian mind, intoxication wasn't seen as some kind of moral failing. It was actually a respected pathway to transcend the mundane world, a way to commune directly with the divine and maintain cosmic order. In fact, beer plays the starring role in one of their most vital, dramatic myths. According to the legend, humanity rebelled against the sun god Ra. Ra was furious, so he unleashed Hathor, transformed into a bloodthirsty lioness named Sekhmet, to slaughter mankind. And she became so consumed with bloodlust that she literally couldn't be stopped. So, to save humanity from total extinction, Ra pulled off a brilliant trick. He flooded the fields with a vast ocean of beer, but he dyed it blood red using ochre. Believing it was a massive pool of blood, the lioness greedily drank the red beer. Well, she fell into a deep, drunken stupor. And when she finally woke up, she was completely pacified, restored back to her joyful self. Mankind was literally saved by beer, and this salvation was passionately commemorated every year in the Festival of Drunkenness. Entire communities would get together, reenact this myth, and engage in copious beer consumption to honor Hathor. It was a shared, collective ecstasy that they genuinely believed brought them closer to the gods. Which really leaves us with a profound historical reflection. We've just walked through the grit, the astonishing science, the grueling daily labor, and the deep sacredness of the ancient Egyptian diet. Bread and beer were never just commodities to them. They were the very fabric of human existence. It kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? If our highly processed, modern world were to collapse tomorrow, would the daily food we eat physically and spiritually sustain a civilization for over 3 millennia, exactly the way these golden symbols of life did for the pharaohs? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and for taking this incredible journey into our shared past.